Good afternoon. The October meeting of the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability is called to order. I will ascertain the quorum. Deborah Lathan is here, and I, Laura Richards, am here. Chairman Robert Spagnoletti is not with us today. We do have a quorum. We will turn to adoption of the agenda.
Note the time, please.
Oh, it is
1:06.
Thank you. We are beginning at 1:06 p.m. Are there any changes, additions, corrections to the agenda? I have none. Good. Shall we adopt the agenda by consensus? Thank you. We will now have a report by the Director of Open Government, Traci Hughes.
Thank you. On September 30th, I testified before the Committee on Government Operations regarding two bills. The first was the Transparency of Boards and Commissions and Task Forces and the Advisory Neighborhood Commission's Transparency Amendment Act of 2014. The Transparency of Boards and Commissions and Task Forces measure was introduced by Councilmember Grosso in February of this year. The bill would require boards, commissions, and task forces to publish on the Office of Boards and Commissions website full names of members, ward or place of residency of members, term dates, biographical information, meeting dates, meeting locations, approved minutes and records, official actions, and recommendations. It would also require that the Office of Boards and Commissions collect and make available on the web the gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability status of all appointees. Councilmember Grosso was not aware until my testimony that the Office of Open Government has already supplied boards and commission members with the ability to post all of the information absent diversity-related information on the BEGA website. Both he and Chairman McDuffie asked if the measure would be redundant since the tools are already in place, and I answered in the affirmative. I did, however, express concern that currently the posting of the information is not mandatory and that I intend to propose a rulemaking in the coming weeks that will require boards and commissions to post all meeting-related information. Councilmember Grosso asked if the Office of Open Government could also add fields that would capture gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and disability status, and I told him that it could be easily done, but compliance will not be assured unless posting is mandatory. The committee also heard testimony about the ANC Transparency Amendment Act. The extent of my testimony in this regard was only to educate the committee about what the private sector has already done to gather ANC meeting dates, agendas, and minutes. My full testimony is on the BEGA site under the testimony tab. Concerning the draft rulemaking, as recommended by the board last month, I did reach out to the Office of the Attorney General to inquire whether the Office of Open Government is required to submit proposed rulemakings to OAG for legal sufficiency review and to the Mayor's Office of Policy and Legislative Affairs prior to transmitting any rulemaking to the Office of Documents and Issuances for publication in the DC Register for comment. Although the Office of Open Government is not required to submit the draft rulemaking to either OAG or the Mayor's Policy Office, I have, as a courtesy, sent the draft to both. There's some debate after my discussion with Art Parker this week as to whether or not I can make advisory opinions binding and create an appeal right to DC Superior Court. So he has sent over the legislative history of the Open Meetings Act. I'm going to review that ahead of tomorrow and make a determination as to whether to take that particular language out of the draft rulemaking. I also provided a copy of the draft rulemaking to Council Members Grosso and McDuffie during the hearing this week, since the rulemaking, if passed, would make the posting of public body meeting information on the Office of Open Government site mandatory. The rulemaking does not address task forces, and that was also something that was under discussion at the hearing earlier this week. Trainings.
Before you turn to training, why don't we just go over those last two issues, which were pretty meaty.
I could have questions about transparency.
Can you move your microphone over, please? No. Okay.
Oh, here, wait a minute, Deborah.
Now, I have a question about the requirements of the transparency. I guess I don't understand why, as a board member, I should have to have my address posted, my home address. Well, I mean, I think that should be a private matter. And I also don't understand, the sexual orientation or any of those other factors. I mean, you can go on the BEGA website and take a look at me, but I think that even in the federal government, have never been required to disclose publicly my home address.
I can't answer that. It was just what's being proposed in the measure itself. I can tell you that Councilmember Grosso, that the reason that the measure was introduced is that he and members of his staff had requested that information along with just a simple list of boards and commissions enabling statutes, the names of their members and everything that was part of the list. He said that the reason that he introduced the legislation is because the mayor's office could not provide even basic meeting date and calendar information.
Well, those things are absolutely relevant. I get that. And I guess I should be addressing this to Councilman Grosso because I'm not clearly you can find my address if you want to, but it's not something that I want to make, easy for someone to find. And as I say, even in the federal government, they allow you to guard your personal information.
Well, I can tell you they do intend to go back to the drawing board on the legislation, period. So I don't think that it's going to go any further until Councilmember Grosso and McDuffie and their respective staffs have had an opportunity to make some amendments. And I have also offered my assistance as they are drafting those amendments. So I'll certainly make that clear. That there's some concern on this end that information is to be included. I don't necessarily disagree with your discontent over the inclusion of that information, but I simply did not address that since
Right.
it's not part of my mandate currently. So although I made the offer to include that information just out of for sake of expediency, because there seems to be some prohibitions concerning technology and I think human resources at the Office of Boards and Commissions to even get this information on the site. But because we already have it available, I just simply explained that it's entirely possible to add additional fields since we already have the option when we're creating profiles for points of contacts or directors of boards and commissions to include biographical information, educational history.
Right,
and the like.
that's relevant, but
Right.
the other things, and I assume that the draft is such that if people want to say what their race, gender, or sexual preferences, it's an option as opposed to mandatory? Or is it now drafted as it's mandatory?
I don't know. Like the Office of Boards and Commissions itself does not provide the public access to that information. Based upon the testimony of the acting director now for that office, that is, of course, part of the application process.
No, I was just asking about the bill that was proposed on transparency.
It doesn't address that.
Okay.
Right. It doesn't. It's not that detailed. So I can tell you that we're definitely going to go back, or Grosso's definitely going to go back to the drawing board. But I will certainly keep the board abreast.
Okay.
Thanks. That was an interesting bill. I agree with much of what Deborah said. I do think it's relevant, though, to provide the ward and ANC location. And I know that there is an effort to maintain diversity, geographic and otherwise, on the boards and commissions. And so if you would say that we think that ward and ANC information is probably all that should be required in that regard. And, it's just sexual orientation.
What about gender?
That's important too. And every board and commission doesn't have a nice website with pictures as ours does. Some of them do, but there are a large number of boards and commissions that don't have kind of permanent meeting space or fixed offices. They're small, but yet they are out exercising policy-making functions. I'm thinking about the Arts and Humanities Commission, for instance, and they have grant-making authority, and they exercise authority over what goes in our public space. I think they're sort of pretty invisible unless you have to go looking for them. So I think it is relevant to gather, gender, age, and ethnicity. And we may, I suppose it's my, my age showing. Sexual orientation seems to be something that is maybe a bit of an overreach, but perhaps I should not be looking at it in that regard. I will maintain an open mind on that. Let's see. So I was asking your opinion as to what extent you believe it's important to kind of maintain this information on the Open Government website, and also in the course of your rulemaking that you're engaged in, how much of information do you have authority to make mandatory?
Well, as to the first question, I do think it's important that the Office of Open Government be able to maintain that information on its site. I'm certainly not opposed to turning it over to the Office of Boards and Commissions, but we'll have to work out just the back-end technicalities of that, because as you recall, our website is maintained on independent servers and it's not managed or maintained by Octo. My concern is, though, that boards and commission members, because the Office of Boards and Commissions is staffed at the same, they have one more FTE than my office does, that we're still going to run into an enforcement issue. But if I had my druthers, I would prefer that it simply remained under the Office of Open Government, because I do have enforcement authority and I would be able to see which boards and commissions are actively posting information on the site, or if they're having any technical issues. So that doesn't inhibit their ability to post meeting dates and agendas in a timely fashion, because they then have to go through an elongated posting process through Octo and their governing agencies. As for the rulemaking itself, the statute is not clear. It doesn't address it at all. OAG, Mr. Parker does believe, in his assessment, that the statute provides me with the ability to not only propose rulemakings, but to sign off as director and as general counsel. In speaking to the chairman last month about this rulemaking, he's fine with me signing off as both. But as I mentioned, I have submitted, just simply as a courtesy to the executive and to OAG, have given them the option to review the information. And I also sent the rulemaking yesterday to the mayor's chief of staff.
Excellent. Okay. And do you, on the issue of creating an appeal right from an advisory opinion, and whether or not to make it mandatory, would it be cited as a mandatory advisory opinion? If it's advisory, can it be mandatory, or is it we're giving advice of what you have to do?
Well, that's something Mr. Parker doesn't believe, based upon his review of the statute and the legislative history, and the legislative history is probably about a half-inch thick, so I haven't had an opportunity to read through it yet. He doesn't believe that. His sense is because the legislative history is silent on the matter of whether or not the office can issue advisory opinions, then there may be some serious question as to whether or not the Office of Open Government can actually do that. He did recommend that I have a conversation with the ethics director to find out what the Office of Government Ethics has done in this regard in terms of making opinions binding. But we also have, of course, the enforcement right in D.C. Superior Court. So the rulemaking in its current draft form simply provides an intermediary step prior to any complainant reaching D.C. Superior Court, and provides them alternate remedies.
Okay, yes. Okay, thanks. You have any more questions? So let's go into training.
Okay. Since the last board meeting, I conducted 3 Open Meetings Act trainings with the Public Charter School Board, the State Board of Education, and the Sustainable Energy Utility Advisory Board. Darrin and I were invited to that board's retreat to talk to the group about compliance with the Open Meetings Act and with ethics rules. And then the Public Charter School Board, the majority of that training did also focus on the Freedom of Information Act. In particular, the focus was also on the use of personal emails to discuss or conduct government business, and that was in light of the Vining case. The Office of the Attorney General has not yet appealed that case. They're waiting to find out first if the judge is actually going to demand personal emails as part of the FOIA request, but they have not yet appealed that case. And finally, on the symposium on Monday, you may also notice in your government emails that I sent out an Eventbrite invitation to the symposium. That's going to allow us to keep track of who's RSVP'd for the symposium itself. And of course, individuals do also have the ability to RSVP on the BEGA site. But the using Eventbrite will also allow us to send additional communications to just those folks who have RSVP to remind them of the event itself. And that concludes my update.
Great, thanks. Let's see. How many people are we looking to have at the symposium?
I raised the ticket limit, and that's just ticket in the very loose meaning of the word,
Certainly.
to 200.
200?
But so far, I think maybe 10 or 20 people have RSVP'd, but that 70 count also includes BEGA staff, which also includes the board members. But I'll continue to send out reminders as we get closer to the date. I also put it out on Twitter, and it was immediately retweeted and favorited a few times.
Oh, good.
So I think that, as we get closer to the date, that probably more and more people are RSVPing as their calendars clear up, or they get a better sense of what their calendars will look like.
Did we go to send it to the federations and the civic and citizens associations?
I don't have email addresses for those places. So if you have email addresses, I'm happy to add them, and I can just send it with a click of a button.
Okay, I certainly will. I think I have one on my BEGA email. We can sort that out
Okay.
afterwards.
I can add, on a related note, Mr. Sobin will be telling you.
You might want to put your microphone on if it's not on.
Don't do this often. Is it on?
Just press the button.
So it's down bottom.
Push.
Yes.
Okay. We now have 3 and 4, counting the one who may be with you, interns from UDC Law School, and when we interviewed them, Yancey was very clear in saying that not only are they invited to the symposium, but we're going to be enlisting their efforts to spread the word and, gin up some support and enthusiasm right there in the school. So,
Very good. Okay, sounds great. That's anything else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we'll now turn to the report by the Director of Government Ethics, Mr. Sobin.
Good afternoon, board members. All right, we'll try to move through this with some swiftness today, but please, of course, feel free stop me at any point and inquire further. Just to go over last month's stats, we opened 0 investigations, which gave us a chance to close 2, and so we are at our current level of, which is normal, 14. We have 14 investigations open right now. We are at the end of our fiscal year, and the beginning of the new one, and so while we're still compiling stats for our performance measures, which will come out in the next couple of weeks, I can tell you just briefly that we, during 2014, we opened 40 investigations and we closed 43 investigations. We had some left over from the year before. Publication and reporting obligations, we are in compliance for the most part. We have our complaint report that's due, it was due on the 1st. We usually take about 4 or 5 days to complete it, and I have reviewed it. I have some additional revisions I'd like to make with the General Counsel, which I'll discuss with her when she returns, but we should be getting it up by Monday or Tuesday. Other than that, we're up to date on all of our reporting requirements. A revised ethics manual, which includes significant updates because of the recently revised district personnel manual, was posted on our website on September 30th, the very end of the fiscal year. This satisfies one of our key performance measures for 2014. Right now, we intend to wait a few weeks to see what comments we get on it and possibly make some additional revisions, but then our intention is to have it printed in booklet form and distributed. We still have some money left over with the vendor from last year, and it's all been formatted, and we use the same format for the revision, so it should be just a matter of submitting it to the printer and having them publish it in booklet form. All right, on to trainings. Attended by the staff, our general counsel, as well as Ms. Petzel and Mr. Burns, each attended a separate day of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics Summit, which they hold once a year. We were fortunate they opened up a couple of slots for us this year, and it was very useful. I think everyone who was there would agree. They covered topics such as outside teaching, speaking or writing, leading an ethics program, introduction to risk management, ethics-related investigations, whistleblower protection, and all the things that go along with them. Ms. Petzelt, in November, will do a full week of intensive advanced trial advocacy training in November, which will be held at the U.S. District Court here in D.C., similar to one that Mr. Burns attended when he first came on board. Mm-hmm. We conducted 7 trainings, 1 new employee orientation, 1 post-employment training for EOM, Executive Office of the Mayor personnel, a full ethics training, or a number of full ethics trainings for the Office of Unified Communications, District of Columbia Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs, and the DC HBX Board, the Health Exchange Board, and the DDOE Sustainable Energy Advisory Board, which Director of Open Government mentioned. In addition, I was fortunate to address the Chinese delegation of law enforcement and ethics officials together with the Attorney General. On to advisory opinions. Since the last board meeting, we issued 1 formal written advisory opinion covering post-employment questions. The opinion essentially set out the post-employment guidelines for employees of the Executive Office of the Mayor, and for the first time provided a definition of agency as it relates to the EOM. That opinion was posted on our website. It'll be published next week in the DC Register. The letters of recommendation opinion, which I circulated, we spoke briefly with Board Member Richards. If there are any other comments, we're happy to get them. Other than that, we intend to publish it in draft form as the statute requires us to do next week in the DC Register, where it will sit for a month before we can finalize it. Mm-hmm. Okay, informal advice. Since the last board meeting, we answered 40 queries. As for the year, we did 12 formal written advisory opinions in 2014, but in addition to that, we also issued guidance memos on the Hatch Act, post-employment do's and don'ts. We did a gifts memo, actually a couple of gifts memos. We did the financial disclosure filing, FAQs, and also lobbyist FAQs. In fiscal year 2014, we tracked our informal advice at 511, and most of that was email written advice, but not formal. Okay, item E, the Comprehensive Code of Conduct.
Before you go on,
yes.
Do you have any questions or comments so far? Okay. A very good post-employment memo. Very, very, very thorough.
Okay, thank you. And I also thought the letters of recommendation memo was pretty good, and Mr. Grimaldi, I think, did a great job on that.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's not final yet. That's why I didn't say anything. Oh, well, that was great. Yes.
The draft.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, on to the Comprehensive Code of Conduct. We are handing out to the Ethics Board members today a hard copy draft of the Comprehensive Code of Conduct. There are still a few sections, such as the personal non-financial conflicts of interest section that we are researching and working on, and some areas where we are going to work on definitions and terminology, but we invite the board members to review it and send us comments as we do so. We would like to have an in-depth discussion at next month's November meeting. Our timetable is to share this draft with a few people outside of BEGA before the November meeting so that we can add any comments to the discussion at that point. Mm-hmm. Such people may include the mayor and his general counsel, the council members, and the council's general counsel, and even the attorney general and the DC ethics counselor, and several other people from OAG who have experience in ethics. So I would ask you to give it a quick read through in the next week or so and just let me know if there's anything so glaringly objectionable that it should not yet be shared outside of BEGA. And then you can get to the nitty gritty after that. But otherwise we'll be delayed by months, so I kind of want to move it along. For the budget, I'm happy to say that we're receiving, as Mr. Grimaldi said, some free help from interns, 3 of them. 2 of them are first-year law students, and 1 is a second-year law student. All of them are working with BEGA to satisfy the UDC community service requirement, and we are happy to have them on board. Unfortunately, I guess they're in class because they can't be with us here today.
Darrin, I'm sorry, if I can just add, we're also going to have a UDC student in the Office of Open Government as well, so what I failed to mention.
Yep. We have only $33,000 in non-personal service funds available to us for the forthcoming year, so we have to be careful. One idea that we've had is we can save money on court reporting, which was a substantial expense last year, by having recordings transcribed where there are appeals using the recording equipment of our room here, which is what the Office of Administrative Hearings actually does right now. They produce a recording and they send it to a court reporting agency where it is transcribed and then used for appellate purposes in either Superior Court or the Court of Appeals. And so they've done it quite a bit, so we're not reinventing the wheel here. We can just do it. And the savings is substantial. It's only $4 a page to transcribe it from our recording. If we were to have somebody here, it would be $4.75 per page for transcription, plus $1,000 a day to have the person here.
Whoa.
So I think we can save some money there.
The first and only hearing that we've had, we have that complete recording. There are no gaps or anything in there. We didn't have any issues with gaps or anything.
There were on some of the days just a few instances where people were off mic, so we didn't pick up on what was being said, but that was the only issue.
Okay.
And I also now have software on my PC, like, for example, if there's chatter before the official start of a hearing or after the official close of a hearing, I'm able just to book and edit the video. But that was the only issue where we just had some difficulty with the audio, not because of the equipment, but because people were just simply off mic.
Okay, so then you're comfortable that we could move to this process of skipping the court reporter and just sending the recording for transcription, as long as we keep everybody on mic in these kind of proceedings?
Yes, and it couldn't just simply mean that we buy more lapel microphones, just like buy another 2 or 3 microphones and make sure everyone is mic'd properly.
Is there any way to monitor it ongoing when we're in the process of doing it?
I can monitor it from the monitor that's in my office, but it won't tell me audio quality. I can just simply watch it
And listen.
and listen.
I see.
But I think that we can resolve that issue pretty easily with just purchasing additional microphones.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let me add, too, that if we do intend to move forward with this option, and if we do anticipate that there are going to be more contested hearings, I'll notify Octo and DataNet, because what it has meant, so far they provided us a courtesy. We recorded all of the hearings, and then it takes 4 to 5 hours, depending upon the length of the hearing, to download it onto our system, where we then store it on an external drive. So I'm not suggesting that it will require an additional MOU. It may require an additional MOU with Octo to make sure that we've got a system in place to house that video for an extended period of time. And when I say extended, making sure that they have it for, I don't know, maybe a week or so, and that we've got a system in place on our end that we can download that video, and that we've got proper storage capacity to maintain that audio, those video files.
Yeah, I think that's critical, because if we ever had any issues about the transcription, you got to be able to have the video. So I'm glad you thought about making certain that we'd be able to maintain the video for a sufficient, I don't know what the sufficient period of time would be, but, you know, if anyone ever contested the transcription, we have to have the video.
Right.
And so I think you need to give some thought to, I don't know what the record retention aspects of the video would be.
I'll reach out to the Office of Administrative Hearings to find out what their arrangement is, and I don't know who they do their recordings with. But also, too, I do think that we need to give some thought, if we do enter into an MOU, that the MOU should include some language concerning the confidentiality of the proceedings, since the video recording will be maintained by an outside entity for a certain period of time prior to it coming under our complete control. Okay.
I had one question about budget. You said that we had 33,000 for non-personnel expenses. That's for the entire year?
That's correct.
And that includes like electronic equipment, paper, pencil?
That's correct. What it does not include is there are the 2 O-type funds that we have. Mm-hmm. And so those look pretty good right now because we didn't use too much of it in the last year.
They are restricted, I believe.
Yeah.
As to what they can be purposed for. I mean, the
That's
lobbying fees can only go toward the lobbying program.
That's correct.
And the other O fund of the fines collected or penalties collected, what is the restriction as to those?
It's supposed to go toward furthering our investigations and our ethics duties.
Oh, so that can be spent on substantive matters.
Yeah.
Could you give us 1 or 2 examples of how appropriate expenditures under that, which does not include like a personnel expense?
Well, we're going to use, for the week-long advanced trial advocacy program for Ms. Patzell, we're going to be using those funds for that. Mm-hmm. We would use those certainly for if we needed a court reporter. Mm-hmm. The Kogel Conference, which is coming up, the Council of Government Ethics. We want to send 1, perhaps 2 representatives to that. I think it's in Pittsburgh. That's great. We're also probably going to use some of the funds for the symposium to bring down our guest speaker, Mark Davies, the head of the New York Conflicts of Interest Board. He's paying his own way for travel and meals, but we may need to provide accommodations.
Thank you. I was also curious as to how we might spend it on like actual investigative tasks. I mean,
Well, we have, as you know, we have a new position coming on board for senior investigator.
Yes.
And if I need to, we have a certain budget that we can spend on personal service funds, but if I need to compete, for instance, a former FBI agent or other law enforcement, and I need to add money to that salary, I'm told I can use the O-type funds to supplement the salary. So that would be another example.
Okay, thank you. So that's the budget. How much did we have in that category of our budget this year that is closing? If we have 33 next in the year upcoming budget, we have in fiscal 14, FY14.
Ooh, I forgot. Traci, do you remember?
I don't. I can get the budget sheet.
We ended up with more than we needed because one of our hearings, the OAH hearing, stopped after a week. So our projected costs for the court reporter were much reduced, and the Office of Open Government ended up using the funds to do the phase 2 of their of the website. I
just wondered if we had a real drop in that budget line item.
I'll check on it and I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I think the remaining amount was somewhere around 26,000.
Okay.
Or so. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough to get the second phase of the site done, plus some additional things.
I'm almost willing to say it was a significant drop from the year before, because the year before we had so much money just to get the office up and running. So, and none of the money was used on personnel because, or I should say very little, because there weren't much, we didn't have many employees. And so that money was directed toward the non-personnel service expenses.
Okay, well, we'll see how the year shapes up.
Next year would be a better indicator of how we come out.
Okay.
Okay, on to item G, the lobbyist financial disclosures. All right, there are currently 58 FDS or financial disclosure non-filers out of a total of 865 total filers for 2014. Rather than proceeding into 58 separate hearings against each public filer who is not in compliance, as the director, I've decided to just issue a second round of letters of noncompliance along with late fines for those who still haven't filed. Per DC Official Code 11162.21A3, the Ethics Board has the power to and did issue a schedule of fines for violations of the Ethics Act, which may be imposed ministerial by me as the director. Based on that authority and the previously settled schedule of fines, which went up to $2,000, we could reasonably fine each non-filer as of today $664. That amount is $2,000 divided by 12 months and then multiplied by the 4 months the non-filers are late at this point. Honestly, that amount seems high to me, considering that this is our first year for issuing fines for failure to file. Also, pursuant to the statute, these penalties are appealable to the board. So if you think that number is too high also, it's better that I know now. So let me just throw that out there. For a government employee who hasn't filed yet and who files now, we're talking about a $664 fine. Any thoughts?
It's feeling high to me. I mean, the feds charge or levy $200 for late filers. And I'm not sure how often it's actually collected.
Oh, it'll be collected because as government employees, we'll take it out of their paycheck if we have to.
Right. So it's feeling a bit high. I'm like thinking, seem to have a comfort level closer to half that, around 300 this first year. Kind of letting them know in any letter we send out, you are subject to fines of up to per the schedule of fines, but we are reducing this since it's our first year doing this to 300. I don't know. How does that feel to you?
Has there been any prior notice with respect to how much a fine would be for late filing?
No.
Okay, so this is the first time.
The non-compliance letter that went out simply stated you are a public official and required to file, and you need to file, and here's your electronic filing information, or you can file a hard
But it didn't say if you don't file, then you can be fined $664. Okay, and then I think I'm more along the lines with Laura because there's no notice, and this is our first time doing it. And in fact, I think you have a couple options. One, you can reduce it. I still think you're going to have people yelling and screaming because we didn't say it in the letter that we sent out. Two, you can send out another letter and say, okay, this is your second notice. If you do not pay, you will be fined $664.
You mean if you don't file?
Excuse me, that's what I meant to say. If you don't file, this is our second notice to you. If you do not file within X days, then you will be subject to a penalty. And then I'd go for the $600. And that's another option. And they have notice. Or, Laura, there's the other option of second notice, fines $300. I mean, that'll...
I'm not comfortable with 664 this year.
Even if you give a second notice.
Because I'd rather I would rather have the initial, like, it's time to file letter go out, and you could be fined if you don't file.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you give them a second bite at the apple here. You're saying, okay, we're sending you another letter, and you can be fined up to, and so they have straight out notice. So if they don't do it the second time, then I'm less comfortable because you're just ignoring me at that point. If you get a second letter, that fine will be $664, and you ignore it, then I think you should be subject to the higher fine.
So they get away with paying no late fee if they file within the scope of the second notice. Is that it? You file in so many days, or you face a fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look at that as long as they get.
But I didn't ask if you guys have the ability to send out a second letter. Is that a massive amount of work for you to do that?
No, there's only 58 of them.
Okay.
Just to what you're saying as far as sending out a letter and giving them time to file, they all got their initial letters before the May 15th filing date.
Right.
Then we didn't send out a non-compliance notice until the end of July. July 27th, we sent out a non-compliance notice to everyone who had failed to comply at that point. Now, it's since the end of July till now, they've had to file, and many people have filed.
Okay.
So the idea that we're giving them another notice, I understand the idea of another notice before we fine them, but not fining people who file within that, grace period.
Okay.
There's been a lot of grace
Okay.
period.
Okay. So what would you suggest then?
Well, at this point, I wasn't involved in the discussion of how we're going to get to the certain number that we're going to get to, but I certainly think a fine is appropriate here. $300 is something that seems to make sense because it's where we top out with lobbyist fines. They're fined $10 a day up until $300 if they are late. And if they're 4 months late, they've still topped out at $300. We can't fine them any more than $300 pursuant to the statute. So I see why that number is comfortable, and it seems.
Okay, but let's
back.
back up a little bit though. But even though you sent out a notice in July, we never said you could be fined.
Right. No.
Okay.
And I understand sending out another notice and the need to do that to give them a grace period with the understanding that a fine would be coming up.
Right. So that's my only concern is this year, even though you sent it out in July and they were supposed to do it in May, even with July we didn't say we're going to fine you.
Right.
So this is the first time we're saying we're going to fine you.
Right.
And so I'm comfortable saying we're going to fine you whether it's $300 or $600. And if you don't do it, you're fined. And then next year, when you send out the late notices, in that first notice, you say you will be fined,
Right.
and you're subject to.
Right.
So, Laura, what number are you comfortable with in that scenario?
I get one more opportunity to file without paying any fine.
Yeah.
And then how much?
How much?
300 or 664?
664 seems too high.
If I may just add
Yes.
one thing, this will not be the first time anyone's been fined for failure to file NPS. The board completed a hearing in which the board assessed a $1,000 penalty to a gentleman who was a candidate who failed to file his NPS. So just to have that in your mind.
That is true. That is true.
But, and the law has now changed, so individuals like that don't have to.
So why did we have to think about why did $1,000 fine?
Well,
that instance?
because I think when we were supposed to have a hearing, weren't we supposed to have? Yeah,
We did have a hearing.
Did have a hearing.
Yeah, right. He defaulted on the hearing. I don't think this rises to the 1,000 category. So,
The board has not been put to the expense
Right,
of the hearing and that sort of thing.
and just sort of flagrant disregard. His was a flagrant disregard.
Yes.
And so, how about this? We're going to get $300 because my fellow board member will be comfortable with that if they do not comply.
Okay,
But
got it.
But the letter goes out saying, this is the second and final notice, and if you do not pay it, this within the next, I don't know what the time period, immediately 15 days, 10 days, 10 days, do like a parking ticket. If you don't pay within the next 10 days, you will be assessed $300. If you don't pay within the next 30 days, you will be assessed $600. How about that?
Okay. Well, wait a minute. This is like raises the issue. What about people who, just never are total non-filers? Are we going to do anything about them? Let's say,
It keeps going up till it gets to 2,000.
Yeah.
at some point, do we have a hearing for those people, or do we just keep? Or at some point, is it okay? We're going to now sue to collect. You're at your maximum fine. We're going to sue to collect.
So I guess then it would become an intentional violation, and it would be a regular Ethics Act violation where we could impose $5,000 fine for someone who just refuses to file.
Okay.
And so the question then becomes, does that just become the cost of doing business for some of these non-filers, $5,000 a year, not to file their FDS form?
I think not.
But let's cross that bridge when we get to it.
But what do you think about the escalated fine? $300 if you don't pay us within 15 days, and $600 if you don't pay us within, 30 days.
I think that we're going to get really bad public feedback on this because
A number of these folks might be ANC commissioners.
I thought they were exempt.
The certification.
They're required to file a public financial disclosure certification form.
Okay.
And so they are still public filers, and there are still quite a few of them who have to file.
Okay, so a lot of these are ANC commissioner people.
Not a lot. There are 58. I don't know exactly how many of the 58 are.
Okay, I think if we go from 2 notices and then suddenly we're socking people with these fines of that nature, we're going to, I don't think it's going to play well in the public as much as it might be, especially.
I disagree with you there because, they have a legal responsibility to file. We've been over backwards. We're giving you a second notice and saying we're going to give you even more time to file, and you don't pay. Everybody else who's not an ANC, if I don't pay my parking ticket, they'll put a boot on my car. If you don't pay, and if you park in one of those zones during the rush hour, you get a $100 ticket or a $200 ticket. And so, I think we have to show that we do mean business, and yet at the same time, I think it's very, very important that you have notice. If we haven't been giving fines, I don't believe that we could just send out a notice now saying we're fining you $300. I do think you have to give them, okay, for this year, we're telling you you haven't filed, and if they think they don't have, if they believe that they are not obligated to file, then they can tell us why they're not obligated to file. But if they just continue to ignore it, then they get fined the $300. If they continue again, then they get fined $600. Just all of our other, penalties escalate when you ignore them.
Okay, so they have a limited opportunity to file without a penalty this year.
Yes.
Then it goes to $300, then it goes up again.
Yep.
Okay, I can live with that.
Okay.
As long as they get another free pass.
Yep.
Okay. And next year they'll get notice up front.
Yes, exactly.
A reminder letter.
Okay.
Great.
Jack, you're rolling your eyes. What do you think?
No, the notice before fine makes it very clear that they're subject to a fine.
Exactly. Okay.
Okay, so what we've agreed to is that, or I should say what the board has determined is that for the 58 non-compliers that currently exist, we will send out an additional letter reminding them that they must file, and if they don't file within 15 days, then they will be fined automatically $300.
Make that 21 days.
21 days. And if they don't file after that, they may be subjected to fines of up to $2,000 ministerially, and if there's an intentional refusal, then they could be subject to the full $5,000 fine, which would include a hearing before the board.
That's fine. They get 21 days to file free, and we explain to them what the ongoing consequences are. We probably ought to do that as a motion.
Yes.
Okay. I will move the foregoing description of proposed action as a motion.
I second.
And we're quite clear on the scope of the motion. Notice to the 58 non-filers, file within 21 days, and there's no penalty attached. Okay. If you don't file within by that 21st day, you face an automatic fine of $300, which does not eviscerate your obligation to file.
Right.
That's
Okay.
right.
And if you have not, and a subsequent failure to file after being, could result in fines of up to $2,000 and potentially an enforcement action for not being in compliance with the statute. Okay.
Right.
So we're not really going to say when it could go up to 664 or anything of that sort. No, too complex. Okay. That's fine. I think that'll get everyone's attention. Just make sure it's in boldface. And I would say put something on the outside of the envelope. Okay. Because
You mean like a red or a pink?
no, but this is the sort of thing now where we're ratcheting up, and people get so much mail. If you're an ANC commissioner in particular, you get stuff from every government agency you can think of, and they're going to think it's one more piece of information. So they need to have something about, open immediately financial disclosure or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
We can do it. Thanks.
Sure.
All right. Still on the FDS lobbyist matters, we met with our vendor for the database, DataNet, and asked for an estimate on several upgrades to the system. They should be getting back to us next week. The goal is to have the most important upgrades in place before the January lobbyist filing season. Changes, the immediate changes we're looking for to the electronic filing systems is, one, the ability to pay fines online and receive an electronic receipt for any payments. Two, the ability to send username and password as well as a reminder and non-compliance letters out via email. Addition of training screens and FAQ links to the e-filing system along with a contact BEGA button. And the ability to upload and attach supplemental documents to lobbyist activity reports. Examples would include responses to question 7, communications with public officials, which can result in up to 30 pages of documents being submitted in a hard copy. So those are the things we're looking to do. Also, I'd point out that like the senior investigator, we're looking to hire a lobbyist, FDS specialist, who would really just handle lobbyist and e-filing for FDS, relieving some of the, or most of the burden, I would hope, from Ms. Petzelt and currently Mr. Younger, who's handling the administrative side of it. We have funds for it. We're going to use the funds, not just what's been allocated to us in the personal services budget, but if we have to, the lobbyist funds as well. Our office manager, Ms. Peterson, completed the position descriptions yesterday. I signed off on them, and they will be advertised starting next week. And we'll start interviewing as quickly as we get applications. Just a note here, we have we also keep track now of our informal advice that comes in on the lobbyist and FDS stuff, distinct from the ethics side of it. And so our notes show that in fiscal year 2014, on lobbyist matters, we did 56 responses to advice inquiries, and on the FDS, we did 123. So we add that to what we did on the ethics stuff, and we've been pretty busy. Okay, that's all I have on the agenda. I don't have anything on item H, the non-confidential investigations. Everything else is for the confidential portion of the meeting.
Okay. I do not see any members of the public present, so there's opportunity for public comment, but no potential takers. Is there anything else anyone else wants to bring up? Anything that was overlooked? Nothing of the sort. Okay.
No.
Nothing. Good. Well, in that case, the open meeting will be suspended while the board reconvenes in closed session to discuss matters pertaining to personnel, ongoing investigations that are non-public, etc. We will resume the public meeting.
Please read the citation onto the record.
Okay. We are closing the meeting pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B14 to deliberate on a decision in which the Ethics Board will exercise quasi-judicial functions pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B13 and personnel matters pursuant to DC Official Code Section 2-575B10. Thank you. Okay. We stand adjourned. Okay.
Please note the time.
And the time is 2:01.